coming to you raw and unscripted. Beaming across Ontario and beyond to places like Toronto Islands, Owenda, Hickson, and Fort Albany. This is the Real Hickson Real Estate Podcast. Whether you're listening on your commute or putting on your suit, whether it's your morning stroll or you're on patrol, you just finished prayer or dropped the kids at daycare, you're in the bar, your car, or listening with the bathroom door ajar, near or far, this is the Jess and Giro Show. We're grateful for flattery and prone to inaccuracies. This is your guide to Toronto culture, people, events, news, but most importantly, real estate talk. Yes, hello folks. We're back with another episode, and unfortunately, we don't have Jess this week. It's sad.
It is sad.
But what we do have is Lahav.
Yes, how are you, buddy?
Welcome back, Lahav.
Thank
This
you.
is your second episode. Very exciting stuff.
Yes. It was an early episode we did a while back, and here we are again.
And we made some bold predictions then. Now we're in a much different state, much different.
We were right with those predictions back then.
I know we were. We're always right.
Let's see how this one turns out.
So here we are, and we're shooting in the office here at Forest Hill. Thanks so much for letting us use your office.
Pleasure, buddy.
Beautiful office. Look at that.
Thank you.
What is that? Like a framed basketball?
Yeah,
hoop?
yeah. A little bit of style in here. We got to style it up a little.
And if you're lucky, we're shooting a little bit of video too.
Yeah.
So if you're on the socials, if you're not already on the socials, Hickson Real Estate on Instagram and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. And Lahav, you got your socials too?
Lahav_Reznik. Easy. I'm probably one of the only Lahavs on Instagram and Facebook. So
there you go. And he's tanned up. He's got the grey beard, sporting it.
Awesome, buddy.
Okay, so what are we talking about today, Lahav? We are talking about the last step, okay? There's the first-time home buyers. There's the next step, the upgraders, the investors, all that kind of stuff. But what we want to talk about today is what happens in those final steps. But before we get into that, we'll talk about what is currently happening in the market. What are you seeing, Lahav?
Wow, yeah, no, it's been a really, really strange market. We had, beginning of the year, we had no idea where it was going, and then suddenly there was a huge increase in the number of sales, a little bit less inventory. That led right into March, April, and then it completely died down, which was a little crazy. We were hoping that the interest drop would spark us. It didn't spark us. We're hoping for another interest drop in a couple of days. Will that make a difference? I don't know. The thing is this: people need to move. There's always people that are, people getting divorced, people are, they need more space, people are downsizing, and it's going to happen in every market. We just need that little bit of buyer confidence, and it's going to push us over the edge, and then I think we're going to see a nice, exciting, active fall. Yeah, I mean, we thought last year was a little slow, relatively, and it was. But compared to this year, there was probably a lot more activity last year, up until the fall at least. Right. Look, the year's not done. We're seeing an increase in the number of showings, through the office, number of phone calls, inquiries, and sales are happening. So we just stay positive, and the market will get back to where we need it to be. It is always fun, as you know, and it's part of the world that we're in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I always like to talk about the GTA market, kind of like an elastic band.
Yes.
It always has this potential energy in it.
Right.
And I think the last fall was a little slower than expected. I mean, it's fine, people being conservative with the interest rates. Everyone's seeing these headlines. And of course, it's the buying power as well. But people maybe just putting things on hold a little bit. And then, we saw that pick up the start of the year. And at any time, right, Lahav?
Listen,
any month, any week,
the key is the buyer confidence, right?
Yeah.
If enough of the media turns around and says, hey, the market's starting to turn, or hey, we're starting to get a little bit into a seller's market, the buyers are going to start jumping on the bandwagon as they typically do, and they're going to put themselves into a position where they're ready to buy again. So we just wait for that to happen. That's all.
And I don't like the narrative that a slower market is a bad market, because right now it's a fantastic opportunity for first-time home buyers.
Huge.
Or people looking to, it's a little harder if you maybe have to sell first before you have to buy. But at the very least, first-time home buyers, and we had all this doom and gloom back in 2022 of how are these people ever going to buy? Like, how are they going to live in the city? But now, here's the opportunities, right?
Yeah, condo market right now, there's tons of inventory, and really you can pick and choose, and and sellers, they're a little bit more motivated than they were months ago. So, getting into the new market in the condo world, there's huge opportunity. Assignments, there's huge opportunity in the same sort of approach. They're not being appraised right now, so people are having issues closing on assignments. So you could pick up an assignment even for less money than what that original buyer bought it for 4 or 5 years ago. And with anything, like, it's just a matter of, you have choice now. That's the nice thing.
Yeah. And just to touch on assignments, how quickly on average would you say they would need to close?
Well, generally, the people who are feeling a little bit desperate now, if you will, they are generally 2 months, 3 months, 4 months away from the final actual closing. They might be in occupancy stage already.
Right. Yeah.
They might even have it rented out. So you might be able to pick up a unit that's already rented out. It's generating income right away, and it's going to be closing in the next 2 months, 3 months, give or take. Some of them are even quicker than that because it's coming down to the wire.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's probably the strongest market right now is the rental market. I was just looking at the numbers. The only thing is that, like, house rentals of houses are kind of leveling out and dropping off a little bit, but condos in the core of, obviously, like, we've had this whole phase over the last 2 years of people moving back to the city. After the post-pandemic thing, we're still seeing that. But yeah, I mean, the rental prices are still up, right?
They are. You're finding, though, that when it comes to, let's say, the condo market in Toronto, because there is a lot of inventory, that generally will drive pricing down. Where the rental market is different from house sales, landlords can be picky. So they may have 4 or 5 people coming to them saying, hey, we want to rent your place, which shows a huge demand, which typically would drive pricing up in the rental market. But landlords have become really picky, knowing that you put the wrong tenant in, you could have long-term issues. So although it's not unusual for houses to sit right now when it comes to rentals, because landlords are trying to choose that right tenant.
And just looking at the stats as well, there are a lot of rentals, a lot of places getting rented out, but also a lot of listings, so it's kind of keeping pace.
So
what it means for a busy rental market. The last thing, cottage country. What are you seeing out there?
The cottages are selling, and so we thought maybe with the interest rate the way it is, that might slow down, but they've got disposable income. Cottages are generally second property, so they're pulling it from their line of credit, or they've got cash sitting, a little bit more cash heavy because it's something that they're using personally. It's not necessarily an investment that they're going to turn around and rent out. Cottage country is still moving along, nowhere near what it was during the pandemic, obviously. It slowed down after that, but this year, surprisingly, there's been a lot of activity, and there's a lot of availability too. So it's a good balanced market, in my opinion.
But I think that's the thing, going back to my point about, is it a good market or a bad market? I just think we all deserve a little bit of a balanced market, for buyers and for sellers. On the buyer side, there's more protections. They're able to put, some conditions in there, and I think that's better for the seller as well.
Absolutely. Somebody's been approved and they've gone through their financing, and it's not going to be a surprise right before closing. And then, from the selling end, things are taking a little bit longer. If it's priced properly and and the house shows well, and there's good curb appeal and there's a lot of lack of inventory in the area, it will sell.
And I guess that's the last point is, if you are selling in this kind of market, it's easy to remember these crazier markets, in the last year or two, things selling in a week.
Yeah, love those days.
Multiple offers and all those kinds of scenarios. It's very easy to remember that and be like, well, I could do something like that. But the reality is these kinds of markets existed for a lot longer, much longer before those markets came along.
They did. And one thing to keep in mind is anytime after there's been an adjustment or a crash or a slowed market, generally what ends up following that is a completely crazy, lots of sales, lots of activities, lots of turnover. That's generally to follow. So the question is when it's going to happen. That's all.
Exactly. It's never a question of if.
It's when. Absolutely.
Different to the States where there is so much choice from major cities there and even minor cities that the trends come and go, right? Like San Francisco's suffering right now. Florida is absolutely booming. And that'll change.
I was just down in Florida, and it is absolutely nuts. People are picking up properties, and builders are building properties, and there's in certain areas there's not enough inventory to keep up with demand. So
I guess that's a whole nother podcast, isn't it?
That's a whole other
buying in the
podcast.
US,
Oh,
buying
absolutely.
overseas,
Whole other one. You can have me on for that one.
Okay, so let's get into the topic for today, the last step, scenarios where you find yourself done with real estate, essentially. And that's going to be talking about power of attorneys, power of sales, and estate sales. So let's start with power of attorneys. What scenario would you find yourself for a power of attorney?
Wow, yeah. So, I mean, there's the simple ones, back before we had DocuSign or any sort of digital signing platform, the one of the spouses would travel and not be available, and then they would give the other spouse power of attorney to sign on their behalf for the sale of a property, for instance, or for the leasing of a property, whatever it might be. Now, when we've got digital signing, that sort of has alleviated it. People are available 24/7 and be able to use their phone to be able to sign. So now you're finding that power of attorneys are set up in such a way where somebody is not able to sign, whether it's mental capacity, that's generally going to be the case. Somebody is just, they're not in a state of mind to be able to sign for it. There may be scenarios where it's the kids might have power of attorney over one of the parents, over both of the parents. That generally happens quite often. Those are the main times that you're going to see power of attorneys.
Okay. And so talk about probate.
Yeah, well, probate doesn't actually happen until after there's a passing and the will is going to be read. So when you're in a scenario where the property is not owned jointly, meaning that generally one person passes away and the property automatically goes to the other person on title. This is a case where the wife may have passed away a while ago, or the husband, now everything went over to the husband, and now the husband has passed away. So now there's a will that needs to be read. Hopefully there is a will. For those of you out there that do not have one, I suggest you go see your lawyer and get that set up right away. That's really, really important to have because it avoids a lot of problems. But during that period, it goes through probate. So it's the reading of the will, and they're trying to figure out who gets what and what gets who, and who the executor is, and how the whole process is going to happen. Homes can sell under probate while the probate's happening. There are clauses that we can put into the offer to make that process easy. It's just a matter, it takes time, unfortunately, anywhere between 6 to 9 months generally.
Yeah, so when we talk to the lawyers, they talk about obviously getting probate figured out beforehand.
Yeah, sometimes people wait, sometimes you don't. It really depends on what the situation is. If it's a simple scenario and everybody's on the same page, the probate should happen pretty quickly.
And I guess you kind of touched on how would this affect the sale of the property compared to a normal scenario?
The only way it would really impact it is when you're selling under probate. Generally, what ends up happening is you will need an extension on closing, and in this case, the seller unilaterally, based on the way the clause is written, the seller unilaterally can extend closing up to a certain number of days that you guys would agree upon during the original negotiation. So if the buyer really needs to get into the property on the original closing date, it's going to cause issues for a typical buyer, right? That buyer may not want this property because they don't have the flexibility. They're going to sell their house. They don't want to be homeless. Right? But in many cases where it could be an investment property for somebody, or they've got the flexibility to stay in their house longer without having to worry about selling it, or if they're renting, for instance, that's a great example. They can extend their rental period. So that's where you could find issues, and it might limit the buyer that's coming through.
Right. And so this is under the guise of probate not being finalized.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Under probate being finalized, there's zero issues. I mean, the odd time we get the question, where did the person pass away? Was it in the house? Was it natural causes?
Yes.
Was it not?
Yeah.
Those are simple answers, but once it's completed probate, it's a typical sale.
Yeah, so the advice here is to have everything set in motion. Hopefully these things aren't a surprise. Obviously things can happen suddenly, of course, but to have it planned out ahead of time is really smart. And I guess the only other way it might affect the sale is sometimes we get clauses from buyers stating it's known that no one has passed away, or those kind of clauses.
Right. Well, full transparency in cases like that is important, and especially if the cause of death was natural. And most of the times it's not happening in the house, and if it does, and they're asking you that question, you give the buying agent an explanation, because there's a lot of buyers out there that find this, whether it's superstitious or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, they don't like
Cultural
the idea of it.
sometimes.
Cultural sometimes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But if you explain to the agent exactly what happened, how it happened, you're going to find more times than not that that's not going to be an issue, and then that portion of the clause would be removed.
Yeah, exactly.
Power of attorney, the key though is many times we have people say, yeah, we've got power of attorney. I'm always suggesting, first of all, take a look at the power of attorney. You want to make sure it hasn't expired, because a lot of power of attorneys, they have deadlines. They've got expiry dates on them. The other thing is make sure it's for the sale of the property. Sometimes it might be for the sale of anything other than the primary residence. It might be for investment properties. It might be specific to an address. So, before jumping into it, and if you are buying a property and the seller is selling under power of attorney, make sure your agent knows to ask the right questions, just so you're not put in a position where you've bought something and you're not able to close on it because they don't have the proper paperwork.
Yeah, you can request to see a certificate, can't you?
Well, the actual power of attorney itself,
Yeah.
Generally the lawyers would end up handling that, but you can make sure that you're asking the other agent to verify that it's valid and that it's for the sale of the property.
Yeah, I was involved in one earlier in the year. The only other thing I can mention is the seller couldn't give any warranty for appliances, fixtures, and that kind of stuff. Normally, a seller would be able to give the warranty, but it was kind of as is, where is.
Right, and that will play into your next topic as well. So we can hit on that. But when
I'm the king of segues.
Yeah, no. So when you're talking, you're talking. We're going to go out of order here, maybe. But when you're talking power of sales,
yeah,
right. That's the way that they're sold. They're sold in as is, where is, no representations, no warranties. Forget about the appliances and the light fixtures. That's not even the smallest bit of worry that you might have with a power of sale.
Yeah.
It can get a little more significant than that. So I don't know, whenever you're ready to jump into that one.
No, that's cool. That's fantastic. I run with the segues all the time. I say it in the intro. This is unscripted.
There you go. Perfect.
I've got notes,
Love
but
it.
it's like generally unscripted.
Yes.
Okay, so let's jump into power of sales.
Sure.
It's not a great place to be in.
Not that sudden. Most of the times you're going to find when people aren't paying their mortgage, they know they're not paying their mortgage. This isn't something that someone can, have you under power of sale within a day or two. Like this takes months for it to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So these are things that sellers know are coming.
Mm-hmm. In fact, last time you were on the podcast, I think we touched on power of sales being an idea or a topic that might be coming up over the next year or so. Are you aware of the power of sales numbers right now?
We've always had power of sales. So even in our market right now, again, not a great market. People are renewing their mortgages at higher rates.
Yeah.
The fear was that we would have tons of power of sales where people could not afford their homes, and then suddenly the bank or a B lender or a private lender, that they're foreclosing on the property. They're forcing a power of sale on the property. Those numbers have not increased significantly. People are finding that they're able to get their mortgage renewed. Maybe it's for a year, see what happens. It's at a high rate. They can handle it for that period of time. So not as many power of sales as we thought might happen. But there are some out there. The thing to keep in mind with power of sales is they are not a deal.
Yeah.
They're not a steal. So a couple things. One, they're generally selling at market price. If a house next door that's similar to the one that's power of sale sold for $850,000, this one that's right next door, if it's similar, almost identical, it's going to sell for around the same price.
Yeah.
And depending on the timing, it might sell for a little bit more. Right? So there's no steals when it comes to power of sales. The second thing to consider is, unlike the U.S., banks are required, lenders are required to sell these houses for as much as possible. It's not about them just recouping the amount that they're loaning out, where in the U.S., they're just happy to recoup the mortgage amount.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where it's very, very different here.
Yeah, we did speak about it. People always saying, "Oh, the bubble's going to burst," and they said that in Australia for our markets. They said it here, and
these are our markets here.
Yeah, these are our markets. I like the context because it's similar-ish countries,
absolutely,
and similar-ish kind of themes essentially.
Agreed.
With immigration and the way that things are set up, the Commonwealth, etc. But we were mentioning that the bubble bursting is less of bursting and more of deflating.
Agreed.
And this is what we talked about last time, about a year ago, something like that. Deflating, and all this like scare tactics. We're in this softer market, And let's look at let's look at these powers of sale. Oh, I can imagine, all this fire sale. People are talking about fire sales.
No fire sales.
Sure, there are opportunities.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
But the reality is, as you said, thankfully our banking system, the financial and the lending systems are a lot safer, a lot more conservative compared to the States. And, we're really avoiding a lot of this stuff. The stress tests that we had in place, when these interest rates went up, we saw those stress tests really come into effect, essentially.
Right, which eliminated a big chunk of the homeowners out there from not being able to afford their properties, right?
Yeah.
So they were getting their mortgages at 2.1%, but they had to qualify at 4.5% or whatever the exact number was. Suddenly, when the rates hit 4.5%, these homeowners, we know based on the banks who are very conservative, could afford the increase in the interest rates, and it went higher from there, and we're slowly coming down now. So there are power of sales out there. Just there's not many of them. It's not a huge fire sale scenario like you said, and they're not necessarily the best deal either. So
exactly. So I guess to talk specifically about it, how does a power of sale happen? I think you already touched on it.
Well, let's take it the simplest way. You're a homeowner. You don't pay. You have to pay your mortgage. The mortgagor turns around and says, hey, you're not paying me, so here's your warning letter, here's a second warning letter, and now if you don't pay by this date, we are going to take over your house. We're going to take your house and we're going to sell your house, and you're still living there, but you're going to have to leave eventually, and this is the situation that we're in.
And they do really give you a lot of opportunities to figure it out, don't they?
They do give you opportunities. Listen, getting somebody out of their house is not easy, and the process before the sheriff turns around and comes, and again, unlike the U.S., the time frame is quite long here. By the time that they have escorted the seller out of the house that he can no longer afford to then put it on the market, that process and that time is significant. It's significant.
Yeah. As I said, they try and work with you a bit. Maybe they go back to see how much equity you have in the home, maybe stretching out the amortization rates, refinancing essentially.
Agreed, and that is what they do, and a lot of times people don't even realize that that's an option for them. If there is significant equity, they'll refinance. It'll likely be at a higher rate. The problem that I have with that is, all they're doing is stopping the inevitable.
Yeah.
Right. If somebody can't afford a $4,000 a month,
deferring the issues.
Yeah. Now you're just going to be stretching that over. It's going to cost them more money. At the end of the day, you still got to turn around and sell this house. Let's find another solution. Right. That's the problem.
Is there any other options that the seller has to prevent the situation?
Well, likely if they know that this is happening and they're struggling, sell it before. Sell it before it goes into power of sale. You do your own sale, you choose your own realtor, you go through the process, you deal with the negotiations. You'll be in a better position when it's not power of sale. And again, in the power of sale mode, although they are selling at market value, people who come into a power of sale purchase, they think that it's a deal, and they're always trying to lowball, and they're always trying to. And in a market like this, when you're constantly getting lowballs and the place isn't selling, it makes you really think, okay, maybe I need to reduce my price significantly.
Yeah.
Right? So to avoid all the lowballs coming in, try selling it yourself.
And, I'd usually ask the questions, what are the issues for the seller? But we're understanding of the issues for the seller. There's more issues for the buyer.
Huge. Yeah.
Because as a buyer, you could go through the process of putting an offer in, getting something accepted, conditional or not, and the seller still has the right up until the closing date to pay off their mortgage and basically make the agreement null and void.
Yeah, and it's also very rare.
Yeah.
Has it happened in all my years? I could probably count 2 times that's happened, and we knew about one of them while we were going through the process that it was likely going to happen. From a buyer's end, that isn't even the most significant issue, if you will. These buyers are buying these homes in as-is, whereas condition. We talked about this earlier. Right. That is the bigger problem, because you're in a situation where the mortgagor is not going to warrant anything relating to title, anything relating to the property itself, anything related to the appliances. you're going to find that you walk in there, you see the place, you buy it with 5 appliances. Let's use this as an example.
Yeah.
You buy it with 5 appliances, and the appliances are all working, so you're not worried about the seller warranting them, like they're brand new appliances, and they're in there and they're working. And then closing day comes, or a day before closing, and you go do a buyer visit, which we like to take our clients to. We go make sure everything's working, and then you walk in and there's no appliances there, and they're all gone. A seller has come back into the house and he's taken out all the appliances, or before he left, he's taken out all the appliances, and you saw it with appliances. Now there's nothing you can do. There's no recourse.
Yeah,
there's no recourse.
What's the line there between what the mortgager or the lender has the right to take or retain versus like your stuff? I mean, what if you have an expensive chest freezer or?
You know what, I'm not a lawyer in this case. I don't know that, but I could share my opinion. I don't think they could touch anything personally.
Right.
And anything that's in the house, that is part of the house, the mortgagor has to sell. So if they loved a Sub-Zero appliance, for instance, and they needed one for their house, they can't swap out appliances.
Yeah, right.
All right, like it's theirs. It's not theirs. They're supposed to recover as much and of the mortgage. So if the mortgage is $500,000 and the house is worth $800,000, all right, they've got to try to sell this for the $800,000 to pay off their $500,000, and then the homeowner will get the balance after all the fees and everything that's coming to the homeowner.
Yeah.
Right. So if you start pulling out appliances and you're changing the possible price of this place, right, then that's gonna be you're gonna have an issue. They're gonna have an issue.
So bottom line, not the best. I'm sure there are
Correct.
some opportunities that are reasonable, but it's just not a nice scenario for most people, right?
Yeah, there's some of them we're seeing that are coming up right now in power of sales are homes that are under construction.
Yes.
So
actually,
for a builder that can walk in there and a builder can walk through and they can see, because it's framed, it's not drywalled, or maybe it is drywalled. Maybe they're able to see what exactly has been done in the place. They know approximately what it's going to cost them to finish it. There could be opportunities in scenarios like that. The only thing to consider is that getting traditional financing on a property like that is not going to happen. So they're likely going to have to write a very big check in order to take the property as is, because the bank's not going to finance them.
Right. And so the important distinction is you're referring to a custom builder home.
Correct.
Like a new build
Yep.
versus, let's say, a pre-construction of a townhouse.
Correct. Or a complete renovation, for instance.
In those scenarios, which we've touched on before, those would be assignments. Essentially, if you can't close, you might lose your deposits. That's a whole different
That's
scenario.
a whole difference, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess, is there any other things to consider if you've got new build and I guess someone's running out of funds to continue the building?
Yeah, they have, they obviously have borrowed money for whether it's for the land or the construction financing itself. Those mortgagors or those lenders can foreclose. They can, force a power of sale in a case like this. And so now they're trying to sell a property that's not finished just to be able to recover the mortgage that they've shelled out. So, it's really for the savvy buyer. It's not for every buyer.
Yeah, I mean, these are complex topics.
Yeah.
Not something you can cover, and every scenario is going to be a little bit different
Exactly.
as well.
Exactly.
Something to talk to us about, or your lawyer, or both.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess the other topic is estate sales. How does it happen?
So, we earlier we were talking about, the power of attorney and somebody's not able to sign it. And then eventually what ends up possibly happening is somebody passes away. It goes through probate. So let's assume that the probate's been done, the will's been settled, and now there's a trustee or the actual owner of the property now because it's been handed down in inheritance. They turn around and they now want to sell this property. So it is now the estate of, the person that had passed away. Generally that could be any home whatsoever, because that can happen at any state of someone's timeline. A lot of times estate homes, though, are older homes that people have lived in for a very, very long time and they're in original condition, but you're seeing what you can get. So you're walking in there and you're now buying this place, whether it's a new house, an old house, whatever it might be. You are now buying this place likely in as-is condition as well. Right? So because the people, it's not as defined as with a power of a sale. So when a power of sale, you're working off a completely different schedule in the agreement of purchase and sale. It's not typically even our standard agreement. The banks or the mortgagors will have their own agreement of purchase and sale, which crosses out anything and everything relating to any warranties or any representations.
Right.
In an estate sale, it's a little bit different. They likely won't warrant the appliances because they don't know if the appliances work or not. They haven't lived there.
Yeah. I guess it's similar to the power of attorney situation.
No, the power of sale situation.
Well, I was talking about the power of attorney. They're unable to give those warrants.
Correct, because they don't know anything about the property at the time when the agreement's happening. Exactly. So a lot of times in estate sales, in order to alleviate this question of representations and warranties, a good agent will make sure that the buying agent understands, hey, listen, you see the appliances, they're in as-is condition. The executor of the estate who is selling this, they don't know if they work or not. They can't represent something that they don't know.
Yeah,
that's ultimately the comment.
Exactly. I'm sure a lot of people have seen these movies or these TV shows where there's estate sales.
Yes.
And you walk in and there's everyone looking around at all the furnitures,
right,
and the antiques on the walls or in the cupboards or whatever. Is this a real thing? Does that happen?
I think it's few and far.
Right.
You're going to find that any estate sales that are of a luxury caliber will likely have, as part of the estate, any of the expensive pieces already distributed amongst the family. So when the house is being sold, those pieces are already gone. Whether it's antique furniture or pieces of art, whatever, the crystal chandelier that was in the family for 50 years, 60 years, and it's got more
egg in the
right. So any of those items will get distributed. A typical estate sale, there likely won't be anything of any value in there. Unless you're a collector that knows your stuff, and you happen to see this one 18th century piece that's sitting there, and then the homeowner didn't even know it was worth anything,
right?
And you decide that you want to turn around and offer that, you include that into the agreement. So
and of course, I guess that's the job of the buyer agent to be very particular, and the seller agent too.
Yes.
By extension, to be particular about what is included and what's not included. As per usual, I suppose. Anyways,
agreed. I'm always asking that. Are you sure that there's nothing in here of value? Have you guys done your due diligence? This piece here looks really old. Just make sure it's not worth anything. The print on the wall, could it be an original? These are the things you want to make sure that they know ahead of time. I assure you, half the time you don't have to do this because those people in those positions are all over it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's something to consider, especially in busier markets or multiple offers on a property, is getting the specifics on what is included and what is excluded. Your buyer or seller might be expecting things to go or stay. I'm always being very careful about that kind of stuff.
You have to be.
Even a shed that you might imagine, the shed comes with the property. Well, it actually wasn't bolted down. It was just sitting on pavers.
Right.
That's gone.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just little scenarios like that.
And the best part is you can make sure everything's clear, and you can tell your buyer, yes, included, not included, or your seller, yes, included, not included. Before closing, you're going to get 15 phone calls saying, was this included? Is this included? Is this included? Or what about this? And so, you're constantly reminding them of what can stay and what can go.
And it's funny these days, I guess because there's just so many options for furniture, or it's, people really don't want to move their furniture neither. And a lot of the times I'm finding that a lot more furniture is being included in sales than it used to be.
Yeah, you know what? Again, unlike the U.S., so a lot of times you're buying properties in the U.S., they're selling them furnished, and that's typical.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Here, it is not a typical thing. People want to make, they make the house their own. Sometimes the odd piece here and there, whether it might be a custom piece to the space, or it might be something that somebody actually likes. The buyers might ask for it in the agreement. At the end of the day, they're paying for it anyway, in one way or another. So. But I find it's very rare, because most of the times that amazing dining room table that the seller absolutely loves and thinks is the best thing and wants $10,000 for, he's going to find that he can't even find a company to come pick it up for free. So our Facebook Marketplace doesn't really. There's tons for sale. So typically not sold with furniture in our world.
Yeah, it was funny when Jess's parents, they were renovating and they went to sell their beautiful solid wood bed frames, and it's beautiful, and
They don't make
to
them
me,
like this.
maybe not beautiful to me, but to them, of course, and they go to say, oh, it's got to be at least worth $150, $200. They're in for a rude awakening when they find a marketplace, and they're lucky. They almost have to pay people to come pick it up.
It's exactly the case. That's exactly the case.
It's kind of where we are. So anything to finish off on estate sales, how does it, does it affect the buyer or seller in any other way?
No, again, some buyers might have issues with how the death happened, if it happened in the home. We talked about this earlier. It's just another reminder. You want to make sure that you're asking that question, because the last thing you want is for the buyers to move in, and then they speak to the neighbor, and then the neighbor turns around and says that, he, took his own life in the garage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just want clarity on how things happen. It's not an unusual question. Sometimes you actually have to ask the question: did they pass of natural causes?
Yeah.
The agent can't lie. They can't be hiding this. I like to do it in writing, so I've got an actual trail of the message itself. But you want to protect, as a buying agent, you want to protect the buyer, and the seller's agent. You want to get as much information as possible, so you're giving the correct information.
Now, an important distinction: if it was a natural passing, you don't have to disclose it unless they ask.
Correct.
But if it was a murder or suicide, that leaves a stigma on the property.
Well, here's the issue with that. So there's two components to this. One, there's the legal component. So legally, you actually don't have to disclose it.
Okay.
Legally, if you are asked, you are legally required to disclose it. So that's why in many of these offers, there's a clause that goes in the offer saying that the seller represents and warrants that there hasn't been a suicide or any illegal activity in the property.
Yeah, like grow up or anything
Exactly.
like that.
So the minute that's in there, you're required to disclose. Right now, do all agents put that clause in? No. So with a selling agent and a seller not sharing the information legally, they may miss that. Someone may not include the clause, and suddenly they don't have to tell anybody anything. That's from a legal standpoint. Then there's our real estate council, our governing body that looks at us as agents and having to do things ethically and so forth and so on. There's a whole other question with that one, because they're asking us, telling us that we should be disclosing it. It's of a material fact. But on the flip side of that coin, they also say that we've got to look at our client's best interests, being the seller.
Yeah.
So we're kind of torn with that. It's again, fortunately, we're not dealing with it often. Usually in cases where there is murder-suicide, there is a disclosure right away. The reason why is most people are Googling addresses, and generally that address will come up in a news report saying that somebody was murdered or committed suicide.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in any scenario, this could be a topic as well, even in a regular sale.
True.
But of course, if you're seeing the power of attorney or the estate, then it's obviously you're going to ask more questions.
Yes. We can't end the podcast on that note. So we're
going to end it
positive.
on action
positive.
steps.
Action steps. Okay, great. I love it.
And this action steps is as we mentioned, like there are things that can happen suddenly, and there are sad situations. But let's talk about there's going to be this huge transfer of wealth and assets between the boomer generation, and the millennials. And, we have to make sure that we're planning ahead. I'm sure a lot of people listening have will kits, financial planners, all that kind of stuff. But for anyone that doesn't, what are the action steps or plans to put in place?
Look, this is more something, that a lawyer would have a discussion with them on when it comes to will and estates planning, when it comes to family trusts. That's another way of kind of sheltering money a little bit. Sometimes you want to move property into your kids' names to avoid the 1% probate. There are things that need to get done. Generally, it is a checklist, but this is something that you really should be speaking to your lawyer and your accountant on. This isn't, even ourselves, we can give very, generic, general advice when it comes to that, having them understand, again, with a parent that's still around, you're allowed to put the property into the two kids' names, for example. Add them to title.
Yes.
Right? That way you might avoid a 1% probate charge. Right? So like little things like that, it's important, but these are answers that you need to hear from, again, your accountant or your lawyer. They handle this world.
Yeah, I mean, it's money moves. Inheritance tax can be expensive.
Agreed.
You can avoid that with putting kids on title. But again, this flows back into the power of attorney thing anyways. It makes a lot of sense probably to have them on title anyways. in case they're needed to be in that capacity,
Agreed.
essentially.
Yeah.
And I guess just having that financial planner, having the lawyer in your back pocket to speak to them.
Yeah, well, listen. When it comes to the power of sales, is understand your cash flow. Put together a simple spreadsheet. See if this is something that you could attack ahead of time instead of waiting for someone to knock on your door saying, "Hey, you haven't paid in the last 2-3 months. Like we're coming to kick you out of your home." Right. So there's planning opportunities in each of these scenarios. Even from even for yourself, for you and Jess, for example, having a power of attorney in place is a good thing to have along with the will. So generally when lawyers are creating these wills, they're creating power of attorneys for each one of you for certain things.
Right.
For, I think for health capacity and for sale of property automatically. So that at least they are there, right? Because God forbid you're in a situation where you need them and it's not there. It's just going to create more of a headache for you than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't the best topics. These are uncomfortable conversations, especially between certain families, culturally or not. But we have to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
These things do come up. I guess my last question is, am I able to put Alfie on the will to be out? Can he sign with his little paw?
You know what? We've heard of scenarios where people have left entire estates to their pets.
Really?
Absolutely. They generally come with a butler and a housekeeping crew as well to turn around and take care of the house and so forth and so on, but they leave it to the pet. And generally they follow it up with when the pet is no longer around, and then might go to whomever else.
Are you being serious?
I'm being serious. We've heard about it. Not here, I've heard about it in the States. No, there's no sarcasm. I've heard that happen numerous times. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And people that have turned around and donated their entire estate to a cause as well, right? So they sell all the assets off, and all the money then will go to a charity of some sort. That happens all the time too.
I'm just picturing like a basset hound in like a top hat.
Yeah.
With a butler, very, very good, like refilling his chum.
Yeah, you really got to ask. You got to really make sure that the butler is feeding the dog good food and nothing dangerous for the dog, especially if the butler is named as the next person down the line.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Okay, fantastic. I think it kind of sums everything up. Any final closing words, power attorneys, estate sales,
sales? You know what? With all of these topics, along with everything else that you do, it's important and it's key that you position yourself with an agent who is savvy, who knows what they're doing, maybe an agent who does podcasts on things like
wink,
this.
Wink.
Yes, exactly. It is extremely important because, like with anything else in life, it's not an issue until it's an issue. And with real estate, if it's an issue, it becomes a big one. So protect yourself, find yourself a great agent, reach out to Jerome and Jess anytime you want. They'll be happy to help you out.
But it's not just about understanding how these things work and doing the right job and being savvy, across the lawyer situation and any of these things. But it's also just having the sympathy and empathy to be able to, handle these transactions.
Yeah, they can be very sensitive in every case.
They can get stressful, and the last thing people want in some of these scenarios is to have this extra stress. So
again, it ties back to the experienced agent that knows what they're doing, that actually treats this, like it's their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're dealing with lives here.
Absolutely.
Lifestyles and lives.
It's important.
Okay, I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Awesome, buddy.
Thanks so much for coming on again, Lahav.
My pleasure, and happy to do it anytime you need me, man.
We're
Love this.
I don't know, the schedule's like once a year, I guess.
It's okay. It works.
Always interesting topics. Always, something interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And to explore. I guess that finishes it off.
Amazing, buddy. Everybody like and follow.
Yeah. On the socials at Hickson Real Estate. We're across YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn. You can find my stuff on LinkedIn. There's just so many things now. Reels, shorts.
Yes.
It's hard to be everywhere all at once, but I try.
Perfect. And you'll see where people love to watch you and hear you.
And of course, you might see the Forest Hill guys. They're across all their social media at the moment.
Yes, we are.
Doing fun stuff, fantastic stuff. Okay, thanks so much, Lahav.
My pleasure, buddy.
And we'll see you guys next time.